The stars flickered in the endless dark of space, their light struggling to break through the cold void. A fleet of human ships drifted, abandoned by the very galaxy they had once fought to protect. No messages came in, no answers to their calls for help. The stars above them had gone silent, leaving them alone. The once proud fleet of Earth, now scattered and isolated, was on the brink of collapse. Captain Elena Hayes stood in front of the window of the flagship Vanguard, staring out at the vast emptiness. The silence was overwhelming. For years, humanity had been at war with the alien races of the galaxy. They had fought for their survival, and in the end, they had won. Or so they thought. "We're not getting any responses," Lieutenant Marco Ortiz said, breaking the silence. His voice echoed in the quiet command center. "No ships, no messages. The galaxy has turned its back on us." Elena's jaw tightened. She had led this fleet through countless battles, through danger and death. But now they were nothing. More than forgotten ghosts drifting in the dark. "Captain," Marco continued, "we need to face the truth. We've been left to die out here." Elena turned to face him. She was not afraid to hear the truth, but that didn't make it any easier. For years, humanity had trusted the galaxy. They had worked with their allies to build a coalition of peace. But one by one, the other races had pulled away. The alliances that once held firm had cracked under the pressure. And now, Earth was left alone, struggling to survive on the edge of space. But something had changed. Something Elena had never expected. A soft beep from the communications console interrupted her thoughts. It was faint, almost too quiet to hear. Marco looked at the screen, eyes widening. He leaned closer to the console. "Captain ... There's a signal." Elena's heart raced. A signal? After all this time? Who could it be? "Patch it through," she commanded. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment, all they saw was static. Then a voice broke through, rough and distorted, but unmistakable. "This ... is Earth ... We're not done yet ... The war is not over ... We still have ... a chance." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Earth? What did this mean? Where was this signal coming from? "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice steady but her mind racing. "Where is this message coming from?" The voice on the other end faltered, then spoke again, but the words were broken, as though the transmission was on the edge of failing. "We ... found it. The weapon ... hidden deep in the galaxy. You're not alone. You never were." The signal cut off. Alana's mind raced. A weapon? Hidden deep in the galaxy? What was this about? Who was this message for? And more importantly, how had Earth found it? Were they still out there, fighting? Her thoughts were interrupted by Marco's voice, shaken but determined. "Captain, this is our chance. We can't let this go. If Earth found something, if there's a weapon ... we have to find out what it is." Elena nodded. She knew Marco was right. The message was cryptic, but it held a promise, a spark of hope that they hadn't felt in years. It was the only lead they had, and if it was true, it could change everything. "Prepare the fleet," Elena ordered. "We're going after it." The crew scrambled into action, preparing the ships for departure. Elena stood by the window once more, her mind focused. For years, they had fought for survival, and now they were fighting for something more. They were fighting to prove that humanity was not weak. They were not forsaken. They would rise again. She turned to Marco. "We're not going to die out here. Not today." He met her gaze, his eyes filled with the same resolve. "No, Captain, we're not. We're going to make them remember us." As the fleet began its journey to follow the mysterious signal, Elena could feel the weight of their situation. But she also felt something else, a fire that had been reignited within her, a spark of hope that burned bright against the cold darkness of space. The galaxy might have abandoned them, but they were not giving up. Not now, not ever, the forgotten. Race the Vanguard sped through the cold, uncharted stretches of space, its engines humming steadily as the fleet followed the faint signal. There was no time to waste. Elena knew that every second counted. The human fleet had no allies left, no safe havens, and no reinforcements. But this message, it had been a lifeline thrown to them when they were drowning. Now they had to reach the source before their enemies found it first. Elena stood on the command deck, staring at the holographic star map in front of her. Marco was beside her, his hands hovering over the console, tracking the signal's weak trace. They were far from the known territories, and the farther they traveled, the more dangerous things would get. Alien warships patrolled these borders, and the void between the stars was full of untold dangers. "We're close, Captain," Marco said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The signal is coming from the Zilithan system. It's a forgotten sector. No one's dared go there in centuries." "Why?" Elena asked, raising an eyebrow. "What makes it so dangerous?" Marco hesitated, looking at the map. "The Zilithans were a powerful race, Captain, but they vanished long ago. Some say they discovered something they weren't supposed to, something dangerous, and then, they disappeared. No one really knows what happened to them. But their homeworld is off limits now. It's been labeled a forbidden zone by the Galactic Council." Elena frowned. The Zilithans. She'd heard their name whispered in old galactic records, but no one had seen them for centuries. If there was any truth to what Marco said, they might be walking into a nest of trouble. But at this point, they had no choice. The message had spoken of a weapon, and if it could help them fight back, then they had to take the risk. "Set a course for Zilithan," Elena ordered. "We'll find out what the galaxy's been hiding." As the fleet changed course, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The galaxy's refusal to help humanity had been a cold betrayal, but it was also a blessing in disguise. No one knew the humans like the humans knew themselves. They had survived worse, and they had learned to adapt. It wasn't the galaxy that would save them, it was humanity itself. The next few hours were tense. The fleet moved silently through the void, knowing that every moment they spent out here brought them closer to their objective and closer to danger. The crew worked with precision, keeping the ships ready for anything. Elena walked the halls of the Vanguard, checking in with her officers. Her thoughts were with her crew, her people, and the future that was now in their hands. "Captain," Marco's voice crackled through the comms as she entered the command center, "we've arrived. Zilithan's planet is ahead. But there's something. STRAG, I'm picking up readings. It's not just an abandoned world. There's activity. Something's there." Elena's heart skipped a beat. What kind of activity? Marco paused, his fingers flying over the console. "It's hard to pinpoint. There's a lot of interference. But it's there. I don't think we're alone." Elena looked out the large viewport, her eyes narrowing as she saw the planet's surface. The surface was dark, almost as if it had been scorched by something. There were traces of ancient structures, towering spires, and remnants of a once thriving civilization now buried in the dust. "Prepare to land," she said, her voice calm, though inside her mind raced. "Get the landing teams ready. We're going down to find out what's going on." As the fleet's ships descended toward the planet, the tension in the air grew thicker. No one knew what they would find down there. The Zilithans, if they were still alive, had been out of sight for a long time. But this was their chance. The galaxy might have turned its back on humanity, but they weren't going to let it be their end. Not yet. Elena stepped onto the landing platform. her boots thudding softly on the metal floor. Her crew was right behind her, ready for whatever came next. The Vanguard's landing gear touched the barren ground of Zilithan, and the crew gathered in their armor, ready to step into the unknown. The planet's air was thin, and the landscape stretched out in all directions. A vast wasteland of ruined cities and broken dreams. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines as they powered down. "Captain," one of the soldiers said, pointing to the horizon. "Look, in the distance, a massive structure loomed, a towering monument to a race lost to time. It stood tall, still proud, despite the passage of ages. And from inside, faint lights flickered. The signal had led them here. But what awaited them inside the ruins was unknown. "Stay sharp," Elena ordered. "We don't know who or what is waiting for us." The rising storm, the air was thin and cold as the human fleet touched down on Zilithan's barren world. Elena. Hayes led the way, her boots crunching on the dust as her team followed closely behind. The dark ruins of the Zilithan civilization stretched out before them, towering spires and broken buildings now swallowed by time and silence. The ground beneath their feet was cracked, as though the planet itself had been scarred by something far worse than natural decay. The eerie stillness was broken only by the hum of the Vanguard's engines powering down in the distance. Elena could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on her. For centuries, this planet had been off limits. No one had dared venture here, not after the Zilithans disappeared so abruptly. But now, humanity had no choice. The fate of their people, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. "Captain," Marco Ortiz called from behind, his voice tight with tension. "The readings are getting stronger. Something's definitely here. It's not just the ruins." Elena nodded without turning around. "I know. Stay alert. Whatever we're about to find here could be exactly what we need ... or it could be a trap." They moved forward, cautiously navigating the decaying streets. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old metal, and every corner seemed to hold a mystery. The towering spires of Zilithan's grand structures loomed above them, their surfaces covered in strange symbols and alien inscriptions that had long since faded. The team's footsteps echoed through the empty streets, their heavy armor rattling. With each step, they were alone, or at least that's what they thought. But as they neared the massive central structure, a flicker of movement caught Elena's eye. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Marco stopped dead in his tracks, scanning the area with his handheld scanner. I think it came from the inside." The massive doors of the central structure loomed before them, cracked and twisted from the weight of centuries. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she motioned for her team to take position. The unknown awaited them. "Ready, on my mark," Elena said, her voice low but firm. 1.2.3. With a heavy push, Elena's team moved forward, cautiously entering the darkened interior. The door creaked loudly as it opened, the sound of rusted metal scraping against the stone reverberating throughout the hallway. The air inside was thick with age and mystery, and the faint glow of distant lights flickered across the walls. As they stepped deeper into the structure, the ground beneath them shifted, causing Elena to stop. Her eyes widened as the floor seemed to give way, revealing a vast underground chamber below. "Captain, look!" Marco pointed down toward the floor, where a swirling, glowing vortex seemed to pulse with unnatural energy. "What is that?" Elena stared. At the vortex, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't natural. It was something the Zilithans had created, something powerful, something that could change everything. But was it a weapon or something far worse? "Do we go down there?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice filled with hesitation. Elena didn't answer right away. She knew that whatever lay below could be the answer they'd been searching for. Or it could be their doom. "Prepare the ropes," she said at last, her decision firm. "We're going down." The team lowered themselves into the chamber, their harnesses attached to the ropes that dangled from the ceiling. As they descended, the glow of the vortex grew brighter, filling the chamber with a strange, pulsating light. The energy was so strong it made Elena's skin tingle, a constant hum that vibrated through her bones. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a large circular room. The walls were covered in ancient markings, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal. Upon it lay a small, dark object, almost as if it were waiting for them. Elena stepped forward cautiously, her hand resting on the hilt of her weapon. As she approached the pedestal, "What is this?" she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the object. The moment she made contact, the room began to hum louder, the vortex above them spinning faster. The ground beneath them shook, and Elena had to steady herself on the pedestal. Suddenly, the voice from the earlier transmission echoed in her mind, as if it were speaking directly to her. "You have found it, the weapon that was hidden for the galaxy's sake." A jolt of energy surged through Elena's body as the object on the pedestal pulsed in response. The vortex above them seemed to open wider, and for a moment it felt as though the entire universe was watching. "Captain," Marco called from behind, his voice tense. "We're not alone." Elena spun around, her weapon raised, but she froze when she saw what had appeared in the chamber. Figures, shadows moving in the dim light, stepped out from the walls. Alien shapes, their bodies sleek and black, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. They were tall, their features hidden beneath helmets, but their presence was undeniable. "They were waiting for us," Elena whispered. "The Zilithans. They knew we would come." The air in the room shifted, heavy with tension. The alien figures didn't speak, but their eyes seemed to communicate something. The weapon they had uncovered was not just a tool of power, it was a key, and those standing before them were its guardians. The storm was rising. The galaxy had abandoned humanity, but they weren't alone anymore. Whatever these beings were, they had a part to play in the coming battle. The only question was, could humanity trust them, or would they be another force to fight? Battle of. The void the chamber was still. The hum of the vortex, which had pulsed in rhythm with the glowing object on the pedestal, seemed to freeze in time. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing as the alien figures in front of her slowly raised their hands, revealing their weapons. But they didn't move to attack. They merely watched, their glowing eyes locked on Elena and her team. The silence was deafening. Elena's breath quickened, and the hum of the energy around them seemed to press against her chest. It was almost as if the very air was alive, vibrating with something ancient and powerful. "We're not here to fight," Elena said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We came for the weapon, the one that was hidden. We have no quarrel with you." The alien figures didn't respond, their helmets reflecting the faint light from the vortex above. They were tall and imposing, their armor dark and sleek, but their eyes glowed with a strange intensity, almost as if they were searching for something in Elena's soul. A slow, almost imperceptible movement came from one of them. The figure raised its hand toward the pedestal, where the dark object lay, still pulsing with energy. Elena tensed, unsure of what was about to happen. But instead of taking the object, the alien simply placed its hand above it, as if inspecting. The chamber shook, a deep rumble reverberating through the walls. The vortex above them flared to life, spinning faster. Elena instinctively stepped back, her hand on her weapon, ready for anything. But nothing prepared her for what happened next. From within the vortex, a massive shadowy figure began to emerge. It was like something from a nightmare, a swirling mass of darkness and light, its form indistinct, yet filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. It reached out, and the room seemed to tremble in response. The guardians, those silent figures, stepped back in reverence, bowing their heads. "It's them," Marco muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "The Zilithans." The figure took shape, slowly materializing before them. It was a being of unimaginable size, its body black as the void, yet alive with faint, eerie glows running across its surface. Its eyes were the brightest part of its form, pulsing with an inner fire, glowing like stars. It wasn't entirely humanoid, but its features seemed to be made of something that transcended biology, something ancient and terrifying. The air grew colder, the hum of the vortex growing louder. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had read of ancient races and their power, but this was different. This wasn't just a relic of the past. It was alive, and it was angry. The Zilithan's voice boomed through the chamber, deep and guttural. "You are not welcome here, humans. You have trespassed on sacred ground." Elena swallowed hard but held her ground. "We didn't come here to destroy. We came for the weapon, the one that was hidden. We're trying to save humanity." The Zilithan's eyes flared brighter, and for a moment the chamber seemed to bend, the air warping with the intensity of its gaze. "The weapon is not for you. It is a tool of destruction created to destroy those who would bring chaos to the galaxy. You, humans, are no different. You do not understand its power." Elena clenched her fists, frustration building. "You may think. You know what we are, but we're not like the rest of the galaxy. We've been abandoned, cast aside, and left to die. But we fought back. We have a right to survive, to defend ourselves. We are not the ones who would bring chaos. The galaxy has turned its back on us, and now we have to do what we must to survive." The Zilithan seemed to pause, its form wavering as if considering her words. The glowing eyes softened, just for a moment. "You speak of survival," the Zilithan said slowly. "But do you understand the price of that survival? The weapon you seek does not simply give you strength. It demands control, and it demands sacrifice." Marco stepped forward, his voice urgent. "We're willing to pay the price. We don't have a choice. We need this weapon to fight back, to survive. Please, we're not asking for destruction. We're asking for the chance to fight for our future." For a long moment, the Zilithan stood still, its glowing eyes locked on Marco. Then, slowly, it extended one long arm toward the pedestal. As its fingers touched the dark object, the entire chamber seemed to shudder. The vortex flared brightly, and the air crackled with energy. "This is your only chance," the Zilithan's voice rumbled, its form growing even more imposing. "But know this. Once you accept the power of this weapon, you will be bound by it. There will be no turning back. If you misuse it, if you let it consume you, it will bring your downfall." Elena nodded firmly. "We won't misuse it. We'll use it to protect our people, to ensure that we never have to be abandoned again." The Zilithan's gaze lingered for a moment longer, then it stepped back, allowing Elena to approach the pedestal. She reached out, her fingers brushing the dark object, and immediately the energy within the chamber intensified. The object pulsed. With a sudden burst of light, and the ground beneath them trembled. Elena pulled her hand back in shock. The weapon, it wasn't just an object. It was a key to something much greater, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The Zilithan's shadowy form loomed over her. "The weapon is now yours. But remember, its power is not without cost. Use it wisely, or the galaxy will fall to your hands." As the Zilithan's form began to fade, the vortex closed, leaving only silence in its wake. The guardians around them stepped back, their eyes glowing faintly, as though they had passed their judgment. The weapon was now in humanity's hands. But what would they do with it? Elena turned to her team, her heart heavy with the weight of their discovery. The galaxy may have abandoned them, but humanity now had the power to change everything. The question remained, would they be able to control it, or would it control them? Unlikely allies, the aftermath of their discovery left a heavy silence in the chamber. Elena's hands still tingled from the strange power of the Zilithan weapon, and the weight of the responsibility it carried pressed down on her. They had the weapon, now the key to humanity's survival, but its power was far more than she had anticipated. It was ancient, dangerous, and volatile. The Zilithans had warned them, and Elena knew, deep down, they couldn't afford to misuse it. The hum of the Vanguard's engines signaled the departure from the ruined Zilithan city. The fleet began its slow retreat, its destination uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity had changed. No longer were they the forsaken race, abandoned by the galaxy. With the weapon in their possession, they now held the balance of power in their hands. But how far would they go to use it? As the ships moved into deep space, Marco Ortiz entered Elena's command room, his face pale and serious. "Captain, there's something you need to see," he said, motioning to the screen. Elena turned, expecting another reading on the weapon's power or another warning from the alien race that had guarded it. But what she saw instead made her heart race. The screen displayed the silhouette of a ship large, powerful, and unmistakably alien. It was a warship, and it was closing in fast. "This is no ordinary ship," Marco said, his voice low. "It's from the Targoth Empire. They've been hostile toward humanity for years." Elena's mind spun. The Targoth Empire was one of the most brutal and relentless alien empires in the galaxy. If they were here, it meant they had learned of humanity's newfound power, and they were coming to take it. "They're coming for the weapon," Elena murmured. "We have to prepare for battle." But Marco shook his head. "There's more. I've intercepted a message from them. It's ... strange. It doesn't sound like a threat. It sounds like an offer." Elena raised an eyebrow. "An offer? From the Targoth?" "Yes," Marco replied, his fingers quickly typing on the console. "I'll play it for you." The screen flickered, and a figure appeared. It was an alien tall, with dark purple skin and sharp, angular features. Its eyes were a deep, unsettling shade of red, and it wore the insignia of the Targoth Empire. But what struck Elena most was the figure's expression. It was not the usual cold, calculating demeanor she had expected. This alien looked ... desperate. "I am Commander Rethok of the Targoth Empire," the alien began, his voice echoing through the room. "We are aware that you have uncovered the Zilithan weapon. The galaxy is no longer what it was. The great war that once bound us is nothing but a shadow now. The Targoth Empire is ... in ruins. We have nothing left but the hope that we might find some way to survive." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined hearing words like that from the Targoth. "You," Commander Rethok continued, "are the last of the galactic races with the means to fight back. The weapon you now hold could be the key to our survival, but it can also bring about our extinction. We offer you this. Join us. Help us rebuild the Empire, and in return, we will stand beside you in the coming conflict. The galaxy does not understand what you are capable of. They will learn soon enough." Elena stood frozen, the weight of Rethok's words settling over her like a stone. Could she trust them? The Targoth Empire, known for its cruelty and aggression, was now asking for help. And why now, when humanity was finally in a position of power? Why would the Targoth, of all races, ask for humanity's help? Elena muttered under her breath. "They've never shown mercy before." Marco glanced at the screen. "Maybe they've learned something we haven't, Or maybe they're more desperate than we thought. Elena shook her head, her mind spinning. Either way, we can't ignore this. We're going to need allies. The galaxy will never accept us on our own. If we have to work with the Targoth, then we do it on our terms. Are you sure? Marco asked, his voice full of doubt. They're the last people we should trust. I know, Elena replied, her eyes narrowing. But we can't afford to fight alone. Not anymore. She turned to face her crew. Get ready for a meeting with the Targoth. We're not making any promises, but we'll hear them out. Keep your weapons ready. If they're trying to deceive us, we'll be ready to strike first. As Elena prepared to negotiate with the Targoth, the fleet set a course for the approaching warship. The uneasy alliance they were about to form felt like walking a fine line, but Elena knew that this was their best chance to survive the coming war. The galaxy had written them off. It was time to show them that humanity wasn't just a race of survivors. It was a force that could change the fate of the galaxy. The last stand, the tension on the bridge of the Vanguard, was palpable. Elena stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the massive Targoth warship that loomed ahead. The communications channel was open, but the silence between them and the Targoth fleet was deafening. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. This was at the moment of truth. Would they betray humanity, or would the Targoth honor their fragile alliance? Captain, Marco said, his voice tight, we're in range. They've opened a direct. Come link. Elena nodded, her fingers brushing the control panel. Patch it through. The screen flickered to life, and the image of Commander Rethok appeared. He stood tall and imposing in his dark, angular armor, but his expression was more somber than before. He didn't look like the conqueror that humanity had feared for so long. Instead, he looked uncertain. Captain Elena Hayes, Rethok's voice boomed through the speakers, deep and resonant. We have arrived as agreed. Our forces are ready to join yours. The galaxy will not stand against us once we unite. Elena studied the alien carefully, weighing his every word. There was something different about him now, almost like the edge of his arrogance had dulled. Was it the weapon they had discovered? Or had their empire truly been reduced to this? Commander. Rethok, Elena began, her voice calm but firm. We're not in the business of forming alliances with empires that have tried to wipe us out. You'll need to prove that you're not just seeking to use us to regain your power. Rethok's eyes flashed red, but he didn't flinch. Your distrust is understandable. But know this, Captain. We do not offer this alliance out of generosity. We offer it out of necessity. The galaxy is fractured. The once great empires of the sea. Stars are crumbling, and a new order will rise. It is your chance to stand at the top of it. Elena didn't reply immediately. She knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about power, who would control the galaxy in the aftermath of the war. The Targoth Empire had been a threat, and now they were offering to stand beside humanity. But was this truly an opportunity, or was it a trap? She glanced at Marco, who nodded subtly, a signal that they should continue. We don't need to rule the galaxy, Rethok, she said, her voice steady. We only need to survive. If you want to, join us, then it's on our terms. You'll follow our lead, and you'll answer for every atrocity committed by your empire. Rethok's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, Elena saw a flicker of something, perhaps respect. Agreed, Captain, he said. But know that you are asking us to turn against everything we have fought for. The cost of this decision will be steep, but we will honor our word. We stand ready to fight with you. The Kung channel closed, and Elena exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. She had just allied herself with one of humanity's oldest enemies. But if their offer was genuine, it could turn the tide in the coming war. Captain, the rest of them. "Fleet is awaiting your orders," Marco said, breaking the silence. "We've established the battle plan with the Targoth forces. They're mobilizing as we speak." Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the star system around them. The enemy was still out there. The forces that had cast humanity aside, that had left, them to die alone, were gathering ready to strike. "This is it," Elena said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "The final battle. We've come too far to turn back now." The Vanguard and its fleet moved forward, joining the Targoth warships. The Alliance, still fragile, was now a force to be reckoned with. Humanity was no longer the underdog. With the power of the Zilithan weapon and the strength of the Targoth forces behind them, they were ready to make their stand. The coordinates were set, and the fleet plunged into hyperspace toward the heart of the enemy territory. The plan was simple: strike fast and hard, disrupt the enemy's command structure, and use the element of surprise to their advantage. Elena knew that once the battle began, there would be no turning back dot as they emerged from hyperspace. Enemy fleet came into view. The stars around them seemed to freeze, a cold, endless sea of darkness that stretched for light years. In the distance, the enemy warships loomed immense, powerful, and organized. It was a sight that would have terrified any other race. But for Elena and her crew, it was just another challenge they would overcome. "All ships, prepare for battle," Elena commanded. "We may have the weapon, but we'll need more than that. To win this war, fight with everything you've got." The Targoth warships flanked the human fleet, their weapons powering up. The distant enemy ships turned to face them, their weapons also charging. The two forces met in a clash of titanic proportions, the sound of energy weapons and missile fire filling the void. Elena's fingers gripped the armrest of her seat. The Vanguard rocked as the first wave of fire from the enemy hit, but they held their ground. The Targoth ships unleashed their own barrage, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Then the Zilithan weapon activated. Alana's eyes widened as the massive wave of energy shot out from the Vanguard, carving through enemy ships with surgical precision. The Targoth forces followed, launching waves of fire that pushed the enemy back. The battle was far from over, but humanity had found its power. The tide of the war was turning, and for the first time in years, Elena believed they could win. But even in the heat of battle, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. The galaxy had abandoned them, but now humanity had become the one thing every empire feared. The reckoning the battle had raged for hours, and the vast expanse of space around them had become a chaotic battlefield. Sparks and explosions flashed in every direction as the two fleets clashed, the Targoth warships and human ships firing in unison. The roar of laser blasts and the thrum of weapons charged the airwaves as the enemy forces faltered under the sheer weight of humanity's counterattack. Elena stood at the helm of the Vanguard, her eyes fixed on the shifting battle outside. The viewport, the Zilithan weapon, pulsing with destructive energy, had been the tipping point its power, giving them an edge they hadn't expected. With each shot, the weapon tore through the enemy ranks, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. But even with the weapon's immense power, the fight was far from over. "Captain," Marco's voice broke through the tense silence of the command deck. "We've got incoming. A fleet coming in fast from the rear. It's the Galactic Council." Elena's heart sank. The Galactic Council, humanity's old oppressors. They were the ones who had cast Earth and its people into exile, condemning them to survive alone on the edge of the galaxy. If they had come to join the enemy in this battle, humanity's survival was no longer certain. "They've been waiting for this moment," Elena muttered, gripping the armrests of her chair. "They knew we would rise again, and they couldn't let you take control of the galaxy. Not like this." She took a deep breath, eyes scanning the battlefield as the enemy forces regrouped. The Galactic Council's ships were enormous, powerful, and terrifying, like the ghosts of past wars, filled with the arrogance of a race that thought itself unbeatable. Their ships were designed to crush the weak, to assert their dominance in the galaxy. "All ships, prepare for the final assault," Elena barked. "We can't let the Council take us back to the brink. This ends here." The vanguard surged forward, leading the charge as the fleet moved to engage the Galactic Council's warships. Alana's hands tightened around the control panel, her heart racing as the weapon charged again. The air crackled with tension. This was the final stand, the last hope of humanity. As the vanguard hurtled toward the enemy, the Council's fleet began to retaliate, their weapons glowing with deadly force. But humanity had something the Council didn't: unity, strength, and the unyielding will to survive. The weapon unleashed another surge of energy, cutting through the heart of the enemy formation. But just as they thought they were gaining ground, the Council revealed their secret weapon, a massive flagship, far larger than any of their other ships, its energy shields impenetrable. "Captain, that ship is going to be a problem," Marco warned, watching the readings on his screen. "Its shields are almost indestructible. We can't punch through it with the weapon alone." Elena's mind raced. The Vanguard and the Targoth ships couldn't stop that flagship. They needed a plan, and fast. "We have to hit them where they're weakest," Elena said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Marco, get us close enough to disable their engines. We'll use the Zilithan weapon as a distraction, then board that ship." "You're crazy," Marco replied, his voice full of disbelief. "That ship is a fortress. Getting close enough to board is suicide. We don't have a choice. If we don't take that ship down, the Council wins. This is our one chance to end." "This," Elena said, her eyes burning with determination. Marco paused, then nodded. "Understood. I'll plot a course." As the Vanguard moved closer to the Council flagship, the Zilithan weapon fired again, creating a massive explosion on the outer hull of the enemy ship. The weapon's energy pulsed through space, briefly disrupting the flagship's energy shields. It was enough. "Now!" Elena shouted, her voice echoing through the command deck. "Prepare to board. We're going in." The Vanguard flew toward the Council ship's docking bay, weaving through enemy fire as the Targoth warships provided cover. The human fleet, united with their unlikely allies, fought valiantly, pushing the Council forces back. But time was running out. The docking clamps engaged, and Elena's team rushed to the airlocks, ready for what awaited them on the enemy ship. She led her squad through the ship's dark corridors, their weapons raised as they encountered resistance. The Council soldiers, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the defensive. Humanity was no longer the weak, exiled race. They were a force to be reckoned with. As they reached the control room, Elena knew this would be the final battle. She kicked open the door, her weapon raised, and the enemy commander, an older, grizzled officer, looked up in shock. "You think you can stop us?" The commander spat, his eyes wild with rage. "The Council will never fall to you." "We'll see about that," Elena said coldly. With a swift motion, she fired, and the commander fell. But even as the Council flagship's control room fell silent, Elena knew the fight wasn't over. The Council would never accept defeat so easily. But humanity had already won. They had fought against impossible odds, and they had prevailed. The Galactic Council was no longer this ruling power of the galaxy. The tides had turned. Humanity's strength, resilience, and unity had proved that they were no longer a race to be underestimated. As Elena stood on the control deck of the Council flagship, staring out at the galaxy they had just saved, she knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had reclaimed their place in the stars, not as survivors, but as leaders. The galaxy had abandoned them, But